G'day. It's time to Down Your Unders. Review and dissection of content from some of the sharpest minds in the game. Hosted by Adam Camilleri. Art of War. Down Under.
G'day everyone! Welcome back to another episode of Art of War Down Under, to episode 218. And last week's episode went down so well, I've decided to make myself a mountain to climb. I'm doing the same damn thing for every single Chaos faction. So I'm going to have 15 to 20 minutes trying to make them not the 25 to 30 minutes they were on the previous episode, because we've got 6 factions to do segments on. But I have experts lined up for every single Chaos faction. First and foremost, starting off at the top of the pile, Chaos Space Marines, and my main man, old reliable himself, the Plague Hulk, because it's been a while since I called you that, the one true athlete of Australia, Matt Morrisoli. Hello, mate.
G'day, mate. How we doing?
We're doing pretty good, yeah. So for every single Chaos faction, we're going to be running through, where are they at now, hot takes, best current build, fringe build, what are they good at, what are they bad at, etc., etc. Then over at part 2 of Art of War Down Under, over on Patreon, you can join us and get another 15 to 20 minutes from each and every one of these experts, going a little bit deeper, answering some patron questions and some general shenanigans. So please join us there. Without any ado, my man, Chaos Space Marines, where they at?
Yeah, very interesting sort of place in the meta, right? Because we've kind of got some meta kings where we've got, some stuff that CSM do really well into Sisters and into Guard and into Nids, and then there are some things they kind of do pretty poorly. It's probably a pretty middling faction. I think if you're gonna go like sort of traditional tier list, it's probably sitting, around B plus, like maybe the bottom of A, but probably around B plus.
Oh, really? I haven't been about the middle of A, but fair enough. Keep going.
Yeah, look, so here's the thing, right? A lot of the rules are still really good, and some things got some point drops that actually really help the army. But the stuff that kind of got better in the rest of the meta, I think, is essentially like direct counters, right? Like now you got to deal with, Aquilon Scions that are 3-inch dropping, and they kill things like your cultists. It's now like you no longer have triple accursed in every single list that gets to just activate and blood surge every single time. So like the Aquilons are actually a bit of a problem for you. Now obviously they can't drop 3 away from an accursed cultist brick and shoot you and expect to not die. Like that's not really a thing that can happen, right? But they do get to come in and block things from charging. They're just kind of annoying. They threaten to take your backfield. They do all sorts of things that are a bit problematic. And that's not even like the biggest problem, because Guard is probably, less of an issue for CSM than Sisters is, because Sisters are an absolute menace. And the fact that Exorcists are basically, the meta build now is very scary. Their strength 10, Rhinos are T9. So like as a combat staging army, right, you're kind of going to really struggle into that, because sure, they hit on 4s and sure they wound on 3s. Like it's not a tremendous conversion on a random number of shots gun, but every single time they get through, they're plugging 6s for damage. They're killing your Rhinos from out of line of sight. Most armies still have at least 2 Castigators, which means all of the 3 wound infantry that's really, really good in the army is kind of not good here. So,
and you've just lost your archetype where you actually were quite good in the Sisters, in the fact that they were having a lot of small quantity, high conversion results when they were just killing one accursed cultist idiot with their melter guns.
For sure, right? So like now you can't really play the staging combat game because your Rhinos get killed. You can't just plug a Rhino up into the middle of the board and then recycle 2 units of 5 idiots out of it every single turn to go and take your opponent's primary, because your Rhino dies. And like, what do? Do you take 3 Rhinos? Like, do you start going that deep? It's probably just not great. And that's just sacrificing power into everything else in the game. So like, that's an issue. I think Guard's an issue. I actually think Tyranids are a real issue as well. I think I
was going to talk to you about Tyranids, but keep going.
Well, I think the armies we're seeing now that are 5 or 6 monsters, and then a bunch of gaunts, whether they're Hormogaunts to go fast and take your primary, or Termagants to go and stand on objectives and then reactive move away, right? Like both of those things pose really big challenges to deal with as a CSM player. Now, like the little 10-man units of Hormogaunts and Termagants are fine because you take Warp Talons. Like everyone takes a 5-man Warp Talon unit in their army at 125. They're really good. I think GW did a good job balancing CSM. They did a bit of give and take here, right? And the 5-man Warp Talon unit is one of those things that I think most armies should be leaning back into now. But you can't really hold primary against that level of bug. And
Yeah.
your best anti-tank is really Vindicators. I played Forge Fiends at a GT on the weekend, and I'm going to say I forgot how bad Forge Fiends are.
Well, Forge Fiends outside of either the Long War, Forge Fiends with Oath, different story, and Forge Fiends with Super Pact, different story. But yeah, Forge Fiends and anywhere else is just bad.
The real problem is that they're even in those attachments, right? Only one of them can activate at
is going to be good. Yeah.
So that's the problem there. Look, I only own one Vindicator. That's on me. I've got two of them that are half built on my painting table that I sort of didn't get done in time. So I'll take that. But like, Forge Fiends are not good into Tyranids. Vindicators are middling into Tyranids. And
They're too swingy. They're too swingy into like arguably an invuln and feel no pain Gribbly.
Absolutely right. So it's like you can't reliably line up a Maliceptor and shoot it and kill it, or a T-Fex and shoot it and kill it. Like maybe you can somewhat reliably line up an Exocrine, but they're the ones that your opponent's going to be protecting the most because they're the most fragile.
Because they're not bringing those out to shoot the Vindicators. They don't do anything. They're going to wait for the Legionaries and the Chosen for their excess.
For sure. And this army also has a ton of 3 damage. So Chosen, Bites.
Yeah.
A lot of these units that are really cost effective, right, just don't get value. So I actually think CSM are quite good, but I think the best factions in the game pose problems for them. Now, CSM have some really good matchups, right? Like they're very strong into GSC. I think Warp Talons are a massive problem for GSC. They run around killing a unit every turn, and they just reliably do that. They threaten the backfield. They're really good at that. Yeah.
They're still phenomenal into every like stripe of Marine. They're still fantastic.
Sure. Yeah, like Vindies with AOC and cover, right? Like they just don't die in the GSC game. Like there's plenty of good data sheets, but you got to ask yourself, right, when your army is not favored into what I personally think are the 3 best things in the game. I think Tyranid Sisters Guard are the 3 best armies in the game. If you're not good into those 3 armies, your faction's probably not good in singles.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, that is fair. If those 3 factions are what makes up the majority of your meta, your best players are playing those in your meta, are playing those factions, then 100%. You got to question whether or not this is the thing you can take to go and win a GT.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so there's our hot takes done. What do they have that's going for them? Like, I mean, you've talked about the fact that, so we know there's fallbacks in the fact that, Legionaries are very well pointed, Chosen are pretty good for the points. Their shooting seems to be something that people are quizzical about. I see people taking triple Pred, triple Vindy, double 4G with the Vindy. The shooting package seems to be really wonky right now. And I've even heard you talking about possibly even putting in Havocs. Where's that at? Like the shooting base?
Yeah, so you got to ask yourself, like, what is the army trying to do, right? And like CSM is like realistically, there are some really good shooting data sheets, but a lot of the power is in the combat. A lot of the power is in the souped up Chaos Lords, the Mo and Legionaries, like those sort of things, right?
And that's because clearing and taking objectives is what win games, and they do that extremely efficiently.
100%. And again, to the point earlier, right? Like, if some of the best armies in the games are other shooting armies, if you don't outshoot them, you have to like get in there and out kill them in combat, right? And I think the problem is that it kind of doesn't do either thing amazingly well. So what has it got going for it? I think the Warp Talons are great at their points. I think CSM Vindicators are incredible. I think obviously you got to play one of the detachments that has access to AOC. So you got to play either the Oath detachment or Renegade Raiders for that. Because AOC cover Vindicators are obnoxiously hard to kill. Like, your opponent can shoot 2 Dawns at you, and unless the multi-melters pop off, you're going to live most of the time.
Or unless they spend 2
You and I know how that goes.
We do. I tried that once.
9 damage from 3 AP1 shots is very cool. So like that definitely happens. But like Vindicators are great. Warp Talons are great. Legionaries are really good. Like Legionaries are a really good data sheet. The Renegade Raiders, Chaos Lord, with the roll hits and wounds within 12 of your opponent's deployment zone. He's really good. And obviously the scouting Chaos Lord is also really good. Like those things are all great. In terms of the like Packbound, a lot of people are playing Packbound. The Possessed are quite good. I think at their reduced price point in Packbound with reroll wounds and dev wounds, they're pretty solid. The problem really is like a lot of the power is spread out. It's like a lot of the things you want to take are kind of good at combat and kind of good at shooting, but you can't build an amazing combat army or an amazing shooting army. If you build an amazing combat army, it just doesn't shoot at all. And then you line up on some of the WTC or GW maps against sisters and you just get blown off the board. You can't stage your rhinos up like we spoke about before because the Exorcists just killed them. You can't go and dive Tyranids, for example, because the Lictors heroically intervene and kill your Chaos Lords, and it's a massive problem. You can't push into guard because that one unit of Bulgaren that's still in the army heroically intervenes and protects their tank commanders and their Dawns and all that sort of thing. And the Aquilon's 3-inch ingress and they stop you from charging certain things. You just kind of have problems into all of those things. So leaning into what it's good at, right? Well, do you build a shooting list? Do you go 3 Vindicators, 3 Predators, rubrics? Rubrics in Renegade Raiders are really powerful. The extra AP is really good.
I was literally going to ask you, how does the allies portion of this, how do the rubrics and stuff come into this? And have you given any thought to Plague Marines?
Yeah, so I played a bunch of Plague Marines right when the book came out, and really what I landed on was that Legionaries are just better. They move faster. Again, I'm talking specifically Renegade Raiders here because that's kind of where most of the allies get most of the benefit, right? I think there's some play to Plague Marines in the Oath Detachment because they hit on 4s with lethals, so real long to hit with 4s on lethals into a big target is pretty nice. But in terms of Renegades, the rubrics are great. The rubrics with Advance and Shoot are great. With extra AP, they're great. But it's just all short range. It's just all 12 to 24. You can play Predators if you want, but Predators, in my opinion, the output is not worth what you get, and you should just spend the extra 40 points on a Vindicator. That's kind of where I'm at on those. It just feels very middling as a dedicated shooting army. I think it's a dedicated combat army in a team format where you don't have to worry about sisters blowing up your rhinos from out of line of sight and then having 1,000,000 3 damage shots to kill your Chosen and 2 damage shots on heavy bolters to kill your Legionaries. I think as a combat army in those matchups, it's great. But in singles, I just quite don't see it.
Straight up, if you were going to a singles tournament, what would your list look like if you were to give yourself the best possible chance? With what you've learned from this weekend as well, because you just played in an 8-round major this weekend just gone with your Renegade Raiders. If you were going again to that same event this weekend coming with what you've learned, what would your list look like?
Well, I wouldn't have Forge Fiends, let me tell you that. So, unfortunately, I only owned a single Vindicator. That's my bad. So I played Forge Fiends thinking it wouldn't be much different. The answer is that it's a lot different. I would play Renegades. I would have the Scouting Chaos Lord with Chosen. I think that unit is really good. It's a really good hammer. So have that in a Rhino. I'd have a couple of Legionary units in a second Rhino as well. A couple of the 8-man Accursed units, so not the big ones, but a couple of the 8-mans. When they get out of a Rhino in that in the Renegade detachment with real hits and wounds, they punch up pretty well. So I'd have that. I'd have 2 Vindicators, maybe 3, depending on points, how that works out. I think I would actually still take, probably 10, maybe 15 rubrics. You want a bunch of rubrics in that army. And then you kind of have to decide based on terrain if the single Accursed unit is worth it for you. I think if you're playing an event with GW terrain, it might not be. But if you're playing an event with WTC terrain that's really heavy, I think you can get away with playing 1 ACDC unit. It does kind of give the army something that it's lacking. It's a thing that goes and touches everything and just gets in the way and helps to kind of slow your opponent's damage down. It gives you something that's quite good into sisters because you're hide and you're basically on them and you touch all this stuff. And even if you're not killing anything, they're not really killing you super effectively, and you're kind of forcing them to shoot the Accursed carpet, right? It's pretty good for that. But 1 unit of Warp Talons, but really Vindicators, Chosen, Accursed Cultists in Renegades. If you're playing anything else, I wouldn't play the 8-man Accursed Cultist units. Something like that, I think, is where I go. I'm not sure if I've just listed a 2,200-point army or something. You have to figure it all out. I'm trying
for sure.
It out based on what I play.
I'll just get it. It was more just a theory on the archetype. What do you think are the best Fringe archetypes that are just one little meta change away from being playable?
Oh, good question. I think if Miracle Dice go the way I'm predicting they go in the late December, early Jan update.
In the bin.
Well, I think they are, right? I think if that happens, 6x5 Legionaries, 3 Rhinos, some Plague Marines, some Rubrics, I reckon that army has real legs. that army gets really good really quickly.
Just min-max MSU goodness, good stuff.
Min-max MSU goodness. Again, back it up with a couple of indicators because they're so good, right? Like, again, I can't stress enough how good 2+ AOC is. Again, on a profile that also has like sustained or lethal hits. So you never pick lethal on a Vindicator because what are you shooting that you need lethal on a Vindicator with? Like it's always sustained hits, right? That data sheet is really good. So I think, like, look, that's my hot take right now. That's what I'll take to Uprising if the data slate goes the way I'm expecting it to. It'll be like MSU, CSM, just lots of Legionaries, Plague Marines, Rubrics, some configuration of that. I think is really good.
Nice. Any other detachments that are like sitting there, almost good enough to take?
Well, like I said, I think Packdown is pretty close to good enough. To be fair, again, I think that's also probably worth exploring the Packdown list with a bunch of possessed. They got quite cheap. They're 120 for 5 now, I think, and
I just wish there was a efficient transport for them.
Yeah, well, for sure. But if you play them in Packdown, you just get rails to wound, right? It's like you just run one unit on the board with a Master of Possession, so it moves faster. You get it up into the middle. You run one unit in Rapid Ingress. You run a Forge Fiend in that detachment with reroll wounds as undivided. You can take some Nurgle stuff because, like, people have forgotten all about the Nurgle strat, but it still exists. Like whatever it's called, Cloud of Flyers, but CSM still exists, right? There's probably a lot of power in that detachment, but again, I just don't think this is the right meta for it to kind of excel. In terms of the Oath detachment, I kind of just feel like every time you want to play it, you'd rather just play Renegades. I feel like there's not a lot of things you get out of it that would make up for losing the move in the fight phase strat that Renegades has. Like, I know that people have won events with it, but I would err on the side of Renegades being better most of the time than the Oath detachment.
So the Liam Versal issue talking about the one LGT with the Blitz with Oath shooting artillery style. I mean, that sounds kind of spicy. It sounds kind of spicy. But
it does. I think Liam's just on another level, and he's
I agree.
challenging himself by playing armies that are hard to play. Rather than playing what's best.
I said exactly the same thing. I said, I'm not sure this is a new meta build for CSM. I think this is just Liam being Liam, and he's in Ascendancy God mode at the moment. He's got his cheat codes on.
For sure. I wouldn't look at that and say this is meta. I would look at that and I would say Liam's the best player at that event, and I don't think anyone was really challenging him, and he played something cool and funny, and I respect it because I love him.
Yeah, I love it as well. I still give it a go. It might be something that clicks with you out there also. I mean, there's no need to just be like, nothing else exists but Renegade Raiders. Give it a go, experiment, because this is a good time to do it. All right, but we are into the closing bits. I know you've already said that you think CSM in singles is a B+-ish faction. Yeah. Where would you have them in teams?
I think they're good. I think they're in your 8. If you're playing 8-mans, they're in your 8. If you're playing 5-mans, they're 50-50 in your 8, like your 5. There's a lot of builds, right? So you can do something similar to what a few of the teams played at WTC is still good, like the Abaddon Vindicators Predator list is still okay. That's really good if you want a really punchy thing to shoot hard and do damage. You can play, to be fair, you can play Triple Curse still if you protect it well enough. Like, it's actually, the damage hasn't changed, right? It still does the same amount of damage, you just only Blood Surges once. A lot of the time, you only need a Blood Surge once. So, like, you can still play that in teams. You can play MSU, Renegades, OC scoring stuff, and go play that plus Bikes plus Warp Talons and play like the sort of OC wall thing. That's pretty good too. I think it's got a lot of different builds, and it can do a lot of different things in singles. In teams rather. Just in singles, unfortunately, it runs into a lot of issues with the top meta armies.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think they are one of the best teams lists out there, simply because I think as long as you dodge Sisters, they can. I mean, they don't get blown out by the other bad matchups you were talking about in teams. Sisters is the only one that I think could really blow them out and get a big win off them. Even Tyranids, I think that can be played for a relatively small loss in the worst case. But yeah, I 100% agree. I think they're a really good faction. I think they've got a number of dynamic little archetypes they can do, but it's all predicated on this. I am a good melee trading army. It's all predicated on the pretty much the value of the Legionary and a Rhino.
For sure, yeah.
It's just the baseline.
I think it's one of those things, right, where it's a really good army at playing from behind and playing for small losses if you do get paired into those bad matchups. Like even if you play the worst possible sisters list, for you, if you know you're not going to win and you're just playing to lose by 15, you're playing to get an 8 or a 7, you can probably do that pretty well. But obviously, in a singles environment, that just doesn't go. You have to send. You have to push and try and win, right? But in a team environment, again, that's part of the reason why I really like CSM. It's part of the reason why I really like Renegade Raiders as a whole. The move in the fight phase strat is completely broken. Sending 6 bikes, something, charging it, killing a 5-man scout unit, and dumping 12 OC on your opponent's side objective is obnoxious, right? It's very hard to stop. So I think they're really, really solid in teams, really, really quite middling in singles.
Easy done. Thank you, my dude. That'll do us for this first segment for this week's episode. Come and join us over on part 2, where me and Matt are going to answer some more questions from our patrons and also going to talk some more matchup strats. And stay tuned. Most likely you're going to have Dean Sinbeck in the World Eaters up next, but we will see what we do, what lines up in my schedule. Take care. And, a message from the Plague Hulk.
We'll see.
And we are back with our second segment. I have the beautiful, wonderful captain of Team Australia for 2024, and now being voted in for 2025. You know him as Mr. 30 Naders, the beautiful Mr. Dean Sinbeck. Hello, mate.
G'day, Adam. Thanks for having me on.
It's been a long time coming. It's actually been a long time coming. So really grateful and happy that you made time for us today, mate. I'm going to give you space to plug your wares because people are definitely going to want some more Dean Sinbeck goodness after this one. So tell us about Blog for the Blood God.
So I do a YouTube channel, Blog for the Blood God, where I talk World Eaters and Chaos Space Marines, tactics, strategies, event reviews, that sort of stuff. We used to do a little bit of battle reports as well. They might be coming back, but it's typically more about discussions about the meta and sort of focusing on player development and tips and tricks that you can use to improve your Warhammer 40k experience. So...
And you are more than just a World Eaters expert and specialist. You've played, I think, just about every Chaos variety that I can think of, with the exception, I think, of T-Suns.
Yeah. I've dabbled in pretty much everything. I've been primarily, for the vast majority of my 40k career, has been Chaos Space Marines. But since the World Eaters got their codex, I've been maining them pretty much exclusively. So... yeah, I've gone real deep on those two, and then dabbled in things like Demons and Death Guard and that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, beautiful. And for those of you who don't know, Blood for the Blood God was around when I started playing at the end of 8th edition. So the end of 7th and even, around, dude, when did you start it? It was like the second or the first year of 7th edition you started.
No, dude, it's like 12 years old. It's like,
wild.
I've been doing this for a very, very long time. And it's ebbed and flowed. There's been periods where I've been posting every second day, doing big videos, big sort of content. And then there's been lulls where I haven't been posting quite as frequently because it's sort of primarily just an additional part of the hobby for me. It's not something I'm trying to financially benefit from. It's something that I just do as a hobby that I enjoy. I enjoy making videos. I enjoy creating content, and I enjoy sharing the experience from the top end of competitive 40k with people who might not be able to access it, the Team Australia stuff, that's sort of high level stuff. Not everybody has the ability to access that. So I'm a very passionate about sharing that experience with as many people as want to listen to me talk.
Fan-freaking-tastic, and hopefully many will. We're here to talk about the Angry Boys, the World Eaters, mate. So give us your hot takes straight off the cuff. Where are they at post-MFM and rules changes?
Well, it's interesting. So pre-MFM, I wrote what I think was the best competitive World Eaters list, which didn't include Angron and didn't include Chaos Spawn, and they were the two things that got hit in the MFM. So maybe I was ahead of the curve, or maybe I'm just like wildly off base here. but I had already made the autonomous decision to cut Angron from my lists, and I'd already made the autonomous decision to replace Chaos Spawn with Jackals, and for various reasons. And then this MFM just sort of solidifies that decision as far as I'm concerned. But all in all, I think the MFM isn't that big of a deal. It's not that detrimental to the World Eaters. If you want to still bring Angron, he was already such a massively expensive piece. Him going up, a little bit isn't that big of a deal, right? If you're already prepared to commit that many points on a single model, then continuing to do so isn't really going to change the calculations. And the same with the spawn, them going up ever so slightly, it's not that big of a deal, if I'm being honest.
And I remember talking to you about your theories for why you were dropping Angron, and to me they made sense at the time. To me also, I remember you mentioning stuff like he's just no good into sisters, like he just goes and trades for an immolator and freaking dies, or you don't use him until turn 4, and then what was the point in bringing him? The same thing could be said for Space Marines having a lot of ways to one for one him, etc., etc., and then you just banking on the fact that he has to come back in order to possibly generate further value. Is that still your thinking?
Yeah, that's a lot of the part of it. He's also very, very susceptible to terrain. Like, I know he has the fly keyword, but these days with WTC terrain, they're quite tall, so you can't fly over them, in which case you have to go around, and that really slows him down. Whereas, like, if you replace Angron with a unit of 6 Exalted 8-bound, almost anything that Angron would hit and kill, they're going to hit and kill, It's
true.
And the difference is you can put them on the very inside of a ruin and then just launch out straight through the wall, whereas Angron has to go all the way around.
Are you saying that an Angron amount of points in any unit in World Eaters probably kills everything it touches?
Yeah, pretty much, because that's pretty much it, because I ended up swapping him out for Khan the Betrayer and 10 Khorne Berserkers in a Rhino, with an Angron's worth of points. And that unit, pretty much anything that Angron kills, that kills, with the notable exception of Armor of Contempt 2-up saves. But outside of that, they'll kill Magnus, Angron will kill Magnus. They'll kill a Land Raider, Angron will kill a Land Raider. Like it's more or less a wash. So, but they have the added utility of high OC. They have the ability to run through walls. They have a lot of good things going for them that Angron doesn't. So that's why I sort of made the switch. And now that he's gone up in points, that just makes that even more of an obvious sort of pick.
Appealing choice. Now, you're not sitting here saying don't take Angron. You're here saying at the highest level, I have found not taking Angron to be beneficial.
Correct. Angron is still one of the things about Angron that I think is very hard to replace, and I don't know of any other unit in the entire game that provides this, is he provides you a way back in to the game when you're losing.
Yes.
The amount of times where you'll send Angron out, you'll kill a bunch of stuff, then he'll die, and then your opponent will get on top of you, and you'll be like, oh, no, I'm going to lose. And then you get that miracle of resurrecting Angron, and now you're like, oh, well, I'm actually back in the game now. There's not many units that can pull off that dramatic of a transition, and that's just by virtue of him being such an expensive piece. The challenge there is I reckon I've probably taken about 10 years off of my lifespan through the collective anxiety attacks that I've had whilst rolling those blessings dice.
And your opponent.
Literally it just creates the most intense, which can be fun. And that's really great. But there's something liberating about not having Angron in your army and just going, cool, I'm rolling the blessings and I actually just want feel no pain and +2 movement. So you don't even look at it because they're 2 guaranteed results. It's not possible to not get them. So it makes that blessings roll just so much more relaxed and
Nice. Well, it is interesting you draw that attention to that mechanic, because I have a name for that mechanic, and those mechanics used to be all over the place, especially in 8th edition, and then a little bit less in 9th edition. Now they're less again in 10th edition. They're called dig up mechanics, where you can dig up from a position of I am actively losing this game, and I get my little dig up mechanic. Like dig up, stupid, you're in this hole. And 100%, they are so rare in 10th edition. And you are correct. He's the biggest one in the game.
He has to be, because being able to, at the start of the turn, at the start of the battle round, just add a 425 or 435 point unit to your army, that's pretty wild.
Correct.
Yeah. So I definitely think he's strong in that regard.
So the only game I have lost to World Eaters this edition is because I had to kill Angron a 3rd time and I couldn't.
Yeah,
the absolute lad got him back twice, and I just ran out of steam on the last one.
The thing is that's you, and you'll remember that game, right? That'll last in your memory forever. But the thing when you're the World Eaters player is, for every story that you have of resurrecting Angron twice, you have 10 stories of not resurrecting Angron.
Yeah, where he died turn 2, never came back,
Yeah.
and the game was
Yeah.
absolutely awful. Yeah.
And then you realize
All right,
when you're playing without Angron, it's a disaster. So yeah, that's why I removed him from the list.
What do they have going for them? Like, what are they doing right now in the game that is good?
I actually think that the World Eaters detachment is probably the best detachment in the game in terms of their stratagems. Their stratagems are insane. Being able to sticky an objective when somebody shoots you to death means that your opponent has to deal with you in combat. And guess where you want them? You want them in combat.
Correct.
So that combination is absolutely fantastic. That stratagem is insane. Having an auto 6 advanced stratagem with an army that has the ability to advance and charge on really, really fast models is insane. They've got I could go on and on. -1 damage in melee is insane. The way that pushes the threshold particularly on 3 wound models like 8-bound and Terminators is absolutely fantastic. So they've got a lot going for them in that regard. And they also have some just pretty fantastic data sheets, like 8-bound and Exalted 8-bound. They're World Eaters, Terminators, even Khorne Berserkers with the various characters attached. They're all really strong. Their weakness, I guess, is that they have very few data sheets. So the data sheets they do have are great, but there's very little variety to be had. So if you're trying to be innovative in a World Eaters army, it can be quite difficult.
I think the biggest downside is the lack of variety. It's pretty much it's almost like you have just a sliding scale of the same like 5 units. It's just like I'm going to put the Exalted 8-bound up, which means I need to put the 8-bound numbers and the Khorne Berserkers and the Jackals numbers down, or I need to put the Rhino numbers up and then the Exalted 8-bound go down, and then I add the Angron number in, and then it's all just the same things, just in different numbers in different places. And I wish there was a little bit more variety to it. So I know that one of the biggest downsides that they have is the complete lack of a shooting phase, and therefore they usually have quite a lot of problems with transport metas, which is kind of a little bit of where we're at right now. Is that safe to say?
It is. Transports are something that you can get around if you're very, very technical with the game. Being able to pile your units around the transport and blow it up so that the contents have to disembark into somewhere where you've lined up another unit to be able to pile in. Like, there's a lot of stuff you can do, but it requires a very high level of technical proficiency to pull off. And even the top players sometimes mess it up. So it's definitely, that is one of the bigger challenges, which is why personally I prefer the Terminators over 8-bound, because when you have 30 Terminators, that actually shoots vehicles to death. You can actually kill a Rhino in the shooting phase with that. So it's not guaranteed, but it can be done.
All right. The big question, the 30 Naders, is it a meme? Is it a dream? Are you still on board? Do you still think it's good?
Well, I've just taken it to an 8-round GT where I went 6-2. And the 2 losses that I got, one of them I only lost by 2 victory points, and the other one I only lost by 5 victory points. So it is absolutely not a meme. It's a very powerful list, and it's gone through a very long process of continuous improvement and iterations to get to where it is. It's not a meme at all, and there's several reasons why Terminators are absolutely being slept on that people just are not appreciating.
Well, go on. This is your time. Tell the people.
So the main thing that I see people do when they're comparing data sheets, like if you pull the Terminator data sheet, you compare it to Exalted 8-bound, right? You go, okay, well, the Exalted 8-bound have more toughness. They have a feel no pain. They're faster. They have more attacks. Like, you look at all of these things and you're like, well, obviously that just makes them better, right? Point for point, they're better. However, there's one sort of very hidden piece of information on the Terminator data sheet, and that is that you get 10 of them in a unit.
Yeah.
And that's something that people don't really consider. Even though you pay more to get all 10 of them, the fact that there is 10 has a few very important impacts on the game. Like, if you charge somebody who has fights first and they kill 5 of your models and you only have 6 Exalted 8-bound, that's a massive problem, because that one Exalted 8-bound isn't going to wipe the unit. Whereas if you go in with 10 Terminators and they fight and they kill 5 of your Terminators, well, then you have 5 Terminators left, and those 5 Terminators now get +1 to hit. And they're going to probably kill the thing they just charged. So now the marked difference there is you killed the target, and you still have a unit. Whereas if you take those smaller units, now all of a sudden you are risking losing entire units and not actually achieving what you sent them out there to do.
Yeah, because every unit has a threshold of no longer being combat viable or no longer being viable for the role in which you purchased them for. Like,
Correct,
you know, when I get down to 2 Hellblasters and Azrael, that unit's non-viable now for except to be 4 wounds to smash Azrael into another unit, 4 wounds of bodyguard. And so exactly what you're saying. And this is old 7th edition stuff you're talking about here. We used to talk about all this stuff in 7th edition, which is why Death Stars were bonkers.
Yeah, and there's a few other things worth considering. And like, people look at them and go, "Oh, the Terminators are quite slow," right? But when you have the ability to put +2 move, advance and charge, and auto 6 their advance, all of those abilities get so much more mileage out of Terminators. Because typically, if you've got some Exalted 8-bound and like you've rapid ingressed them, even without the advance and charge, and even without the +2 move, they're probably going to be able to make contact with their targets anyway.
Yeah.
Whereas the Terminators, when you go, I'm adding +2 move, now you're adding like 40% movement.
Yeah.
You know, and then when you auto 6 of their advance, you're adding like an additional 110%, you know, because you go from a 5-inch move to a 6-inch advance. Like, you're adding more movement than you had. It makes them so much faster. And that's something that I think people often underestimate as well, just how fast these Terminators are.
All right, moving on. So, talking more about some of the downsides, is there anything really active in the meta right now that it's just like a brick wall for World Eaters?
There's a few, and I think ultimately this is probably why we don't see a great deal of World Eaters lists dominating, you know, super mages and things like that, is because they do have a few hard counters, and that's just by virtue of them being relatively one-dimensional, right? When all of your damage is done in combat, it becomes really hard to overcome certain obstacles. And then there's also certain armies that are teched with, you know, things like reactive moves that can become, you know, really, really hard challenges for the World Eaters player to solve.
Fights first.
Yeah, quite vulnerable to fights first, vulnerable to anything with -1 damage, because everything in the army is damage 2. Whether it's Terminators or 8-bound or, you know, Berserkers, there's nothing that's damaged 3 or 4.
No sense to me that both Custodes and like World Eaters, like the two like most baller, you know, combat looking armies, just like damage 2, like, you know, no more. You don't get anything else, mate.
Especially like, you look at the Exalted 8-bound and they got these epic chain fists that are like strength 15 or something ridiculous, you know, on the charge, and then they go AP 3, like they're these crazy high like strength things, but they're damage 2. And it's like, what? How is that? That just seems incongruent. It doesn't really make sense. So that's why I think that some spicy off-meta picks that you don't see people take too often, but I think is one of the only ways to dig World Eaters out of that, is things like Mauler Fiends and Forge Fiends. Being able to bring that, you know, higher damage stuff to the table is quite useful.
All right, jumping into our last couple of questions. If you were going to a GT right now, let's say you were going to Uprising tomorrow, what would your World Eaters list look like for that event?
I would be submitting the 30nators list, the exact list that I took to WTC, exact list that I took to the GT last weekend.
You're a madman. All right, tell us the whole list. Run it down for us.
All right, so you got Khan the Betrayer, unit of 10 Berserkers. Then you've got 3 units of 10 Jackals, a unit of 5 Berserkers just for trading on those midfield objectives, 2 units of regular 8-bound, a Rhino for Khan to go in, and then 3 units of 10 Terminators. So, and now there's a few things there. Yeah, there's a few things there. So the single character, single vehicle is amazingly powerful, because what you do is you put Khan inside the Rhino, you put the Rhino behind a terrain piece in your own deployment zone somewhere safe, and now if your opponent draws Assassinate or Bring It Down, they can't voluntarily discard it, because you technically can achieve it, but good luck trying, right?
Yeah,
and then you basically you don't bring those pieces out until later in the game, when you need them, and as a result, it hurts your opponent's ability to score their secondaries, which is really, really good. There's a lot of people that talk about Master of Executions being significantly better than Khan, and look, in a lot of ways, he is. One of the reasons that I like Khan is because he solves very specific problems that the Master of Executions doesn't, and that is things like Catan, things like Magnus. He's really good into those really, really tough targets that have -1 damage, because he just goes, here's a billion attacks with his berserkers, all rerolling ones to hit and wound, and then Khan himself, goes in and does 3 damage attacks, which is perfect into things that have half damage, because it only goes down by 1 pip. So it's actually kind of like 33% reduction instead of 50% reduction. So that's why Khan's in the unit. And also Khan has the ability to always fight on death, which you'd be surprised how often that flips games, because your opponent, you throw Khan out and it's like, yeah, cool, you don't have fights first, but if they charge you to try to fight you, you're going to fight on death and probably take them out with you. So it's quite effective in that regard as well.
Also, like, the points are a consideration again, because it's 110 for the Master of Executions now, and then if you want to put the Berserker Glaive back on him, that you're talking another 25, so it's 135.
Yeah,
and
correct.
Khan comes in at only 100. Like, Khan is genuinely 10 points cheaper than the Mo now. So I 100% agree. Like, 100% agree. Also,
and there's some games where if I'm playing into like MSU combat stuff, like if I'm playing even sometimes in the mirror match, what I'll actually do is I'll detach Khan and I'll run him on his own. And the reason
he's
for
good
that
for
is
a unit by himself.
He's good. He'll trade up for a unit. So if they throw a unit of 8 bound onto an objective and I want to kill it, I'll throw Khan in, and then I'll throw like Terminators into his Exalted 8 bound across the way. Yep. I'll fight first with the Exalted 8 bound, and now if he wants to interrupt and kill Khan, anyway, that's fine, because I fight on death and kill you anyway. And as a result, I still have my Berserkers in that Rhino ready to launch out for the next turn.
I like that.
So
that's some sick play.
So there is a world where you can detach Khan, and his fight on death ability is actually really, really impactful in some games.
All right. Can you explain to me why the Mo went up again? Just someone tell me, because that made no sense to me.
Racism against world eaters, I guess. Like it's it's just like that for some reason they hate world eaters as a faction, and they keep hitting it over and over and over.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I played against Dark Angels who had a Judicia who was like, ridiculously cheap in comparison. And I understand that the argument would be that the Master of Executions gets attached to really scary combat units like Berserkers. But it's like, well, hang on, that Judicia was attached to Inner Circle companions. They're way better. They're way better than the
chosen,
Berserkers, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, so he's a better character than a Mo, because he can take things like Artificer Armor. He has all of the different stratagems you can use on him. Like, he's a really good character in his own right, and you can attach him to a better unit. Like, I don't understand. Like,
they're the same stat line and the same melee profile. 5 attacks in on 2, 7/2/2, dev precision. They're the same. Except yours is 110 and mine is 70. It's 40 points less.
And yours has an invulnerable save, correct?
4+ invuln, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have an invuln either. No.
Suck it.
So it's like the Master of Executions, he's precision bait. If your opponent goes in and precisions him out, he just dies. He's essentially 2 Berserkers strapped together. Whereas, the Judicia, and there's plenty of examples like this of units that give fights first to really powerful units. So I honestly just think that somebody at GW got bad touched by a World Eaters player, and as a result, they they just got it in for Master of Executions. And I don't know what else to say on that front.
No, it is what it is. All right, so closing couple of questions. If you were to put are there any fringe builds for World Eaters that you think are just waiting on the wings for a little bit of meta change, a little bit of a shift here? Is there anything that you really want to take as a World Eaters build, but you're like, not yet?
There's a few. So I think that obviously the main meta list that people run with, Anger on a bunch of 8 bound, couple units of Berserkers, couple units of Exalted, that sort of build. That's the standard. And then I think a lot of people adapt that. Some people will add in Mauler Fiends. Some people will add in Forge Fiends. Some crazy people like me will rip it all out and put Terminators in.
Yeah.
There's the Lord of Skulls, which is an interesting one because his main problem is actually terrain, not points. But if he gets significant points reduction, well, then you can sort of look past the terrain issue and you can just bring him anyway. So, yeah, I think almost every unit in the World Eaters army kind of makes, with the notable exception of Helldrakes, kind of makes some degree of sense. Like Defilers, they're okay. You know, the Mauler Fiends are okay. Forge Fiends are okay. Hellbrutes are okay. You know, none of it's bad. So you can sort of just throw together a list based on aesthetic preferences and you'll probably be fine.
Yep. Fair. All right, mate. Last question. In singles play, where do you rank World Eaters in the current like competitive tier list? So S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier. Where would you put it?
I'd say they're a solid A tier. They can take, man, it depends how you define your tiers, but for me, any army that can take it to most people on most days and hold their own and kind of bullies the weaker factions or at least has very, very strong matchups into certain factions. So, for example, I don't think it's possible to lose a game of World Eaters versus Tau. Like, the Tau just hate World Eaters so much. So anytime you've got a faction that has those really commanding, you know, matchups, that sort of has to make it an A tier. It's not quite S tier. S tier is something like Sisters of Battle that kind of just don't have any bad matchups. But yeah, it's definitely a solid A tier, I'd say.
Beautiful. What about in teams? Would you change your ranking at all?
Yeah, I think they're a must-have in teams. Absolutely must.
Nice. Cool.
Because the thing is, the World Eaters benefit massively from table pick. If we can pick a table that's really, really dense terrain, all of a sudden the harder matchups become easier. Things like things like Guard, you know, that can be really hard if you don't have places to hide and you can't sort of get around their vehicles. But if you're on a table that's really dense, then all of a sudden it's not that big of a problem. So, yeah, I'd definitely say in teams, they're a must-have. And they're also one of their biggest weaknesses is that they do have 2 or 3 things out there that sort of prey on them. And if you can dodge those matchups, you become a massive asset to your team.
That's fair. That is fair. I like all the points you've made. And on that note, we are done with this first segment. Please come over and join us over on part 2. We're going to get some more from Dean. We're going to talk some matchups, going to make him answer some Patreon questions. But apart from that, please feel free to plug your wares once more, mate, and give us any of your parting thoughts.
All right. Well, just, check me out on blogforthebloodgod.com and Blog for the Blood God over on YouTube. And that's where you'll find all of my content where I talk about this sort of stuff for hours on end into a camera.
Beautiful, mate, and well done. All right, take care. Check that out, and we'll see you on part 2. Bye. And we are back for our third and final segment for this week's show. I know I said I said I'm speaking to my patrons right now. I was hoping to be able to get the State of the Super Faction episodes for Chaos and Imperium done, but Chaos has 6 freaking factions in it, and I'm going to be cutting it into 2 weeks. I'm just going to do Chaos Super Faction week 1, Chaos Super Faction week 2, and week 1's going to have, well, you've already probably heard by now, going to have Chaos Space Marines, World Eaters, and now Chaos Knights, because that was the order I recorded them in. So you can expect T-Suns, Death Guard, and Demons over on next week's show. But I've got one of my main men with me is Dick Vanderhaast, or I call him Dickie V for short. And feel free to do that as well. I'm sure he'll love it. Hello, mate.
Hello, Adam. Thank you for having me.
Chaos Knights, my dude, one of my passions. I actually have a Chaos Knight army being painted right now by the wonderful Adam Abramowitz of the Army Painter.
I'm so jealous.
Yeah. I had a scheme in my head, and I didn't have the time to do it. So I was standing out there at Mardi Gras with him one day, and I just threw out the concept of the army, and he's like, "I'll paint it," and so he's painting it. So and I may be playing them pretty extensively once that gets finished. So I can't freaking wait, because I've been borrowing them here, there, and everywhere to play them for the couple of events that I've played them. But you are an absolute Chaos Knight stan, and you're going on quite a journey with it at the moment. So, my man, hot takes, where are they at post MFM and rules changes?
Ooh, the hottest of takes. They're better than they were, I would say. If I recall correctly, they were like in the D or the low C range the last time you did a faction ladder.
Yeah.
And I would say they crept up just 1 tier. There would be like B-ish or high up C now. C now.
I tend to agree.
Yeah. Missions, they're really good at missions still. Massive indirect never hurts anyone. And some people just can't handle T10, mass T10.
Yeah. Yep, I tend to agree. I think all the things that they do, they still do, but a lot of their biggest predators got hit, and therefore they went up a little bit. But and we talked about this already. The things that they're bad into, they're still kind of bad into, because for the fact of the matter is the build has not changed like one iota since the launch of the edition, right?
No, it's so weird. Every probably most competitive Chaos Knights players play around 12 dogs or hogs, and the only thing that changes about my models is the arms I put on them.
Yep. Exactly right. I expect that to be the same for mine. It's just pretty much whether so sometimes we've gone down to 4 carnivores from 6. Sometimes we've gone down to 4 brigands from 6. Sometimes it's 5. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's allies. Sometimes it's not allies. But apart from that, it's pretty much 2 data sheets and some utility for the entire edition.
Yes. Yeah, people keep asking me when I get bored with them, but I just love the data sheet so much that I just don't get bored with them for some reason. It's very weird.
Well, it's a very rewarding faction, right? Because it is the same data sheet, but they're data sheets that operate in every phase of the game. Like you have very good melee, very good shooting, very good toughness, and it's just up to you to use it appropriately, right?
Yeah, very good mobility. And I don't know about you, but what I hate most about the state of the game at this moment, which is awesome, by the way, but just the one bad thing is that if you get first turn, like the player who has to go first, then you usually don't do anything. But with Chaos Knights, you could actually do stuff. Like you could destroy that single character hiding out somewhere, and you can kill the chaff unit, which was going to be on a corner of the board, scoring 15 points over the course of the game. And that just feels good.
Well, exactly right. The indirect is such a key to the identity, in such that if you just play a 1-for-1 trading, like night trading game, you generally lose.
For sure.
Whereas you're trading 1-for-1 night, but also working on next turn's problem, and it means that you don't have to trade a knight for 5 scouts. You can just kill the 5 scouts. So now, usually with 2 turns of havoc launches, but sometimes 1. Sometimes you can live that dream and kill them in 1 turn.
It's the magic of sustained hits on 12 dogs. It does something.
So, in your estimation, what do they have going for them in the meta at the moment? Like, what are they doing that is strong, that is powerful, that is good?
For me, it's always been strong primary game. So the fact that they can walk through walls makes them very mobile. They have OC 8 or 10 if you're playing one of the big dudes, so they can get around the board and stand on objectives fast. That's very good. And the fact that the secret missions have been curtailed a bit means that you're less likely to get flipped the last turn of the game because of one of those secret missions. So that's good for them. And they're generally good at doing the missions, although it does hurt when you pull like one of the great cards like Containment turn 4, and you actually do need to use all your 6 remaining knights, if you're lucky to have that many, to do stuff and not to do an action. So the mission play is good, but you do need a little bit of luck when pulling the cards at the right time.
Yeah, totally agree. Although there's not many cards you can pull off the top and like just not score, right? It's just the risk reward, like of doing stuff like Containment with 2 knights rather than activating them to kill things or put pressure or hold primary, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's totally it. And also sometimes you just really need the CP. So sometimes you gonna have to throw a card just to get that CP to be able to do an interrupt next turn.
Yeah, I was going to say the 1 CP heroic intervention I think was a much bigger change for Chaos Knights than it was for many other armies, because it was for sure. I'd literally only time I'd ever heroic previously was with a Lancer to protect the carnivore. No, that was it. Sure, two CP heroic on a Lancer, that sounds fine. But now 1 CP, are you finding that you're using that strat like a lot now?
I am doing it a lot. Yes. Yeah, a rogue division is massive. Also, those few missions that rewards battle line. It doesn't feel like a lot, but every time you play one of those at an event, it does feel like cheating for some reason because it always comes up.
Yeah.
Like I played an event where they had the one where you could fall back and do actions, and it was in my head I was doing all sorts of tricks to be able to do what I wanted to do and also do the action, and then it was like, oh wait, I could just fall back this 2-wood knight here and do the action over there.
Yeah.
And that meant I had lost nothing. It was great. Yeah.
Are you finding like previously? I was actually just a question out of left field. Did you ever secret mission much with Chaos Knights?
Never.
Yeah, I had never done secret mission with Chaos Knights as well. It just wasn't it wasn't a thing we're built to do.
No, I mean you could do it, but if you play very cagey, you in theory you could do the one where you hold all the middle objectives. If you play very aggressive, you could do the one where you hold your enemy, where you are in your enemy's deployment zone. But because you are mainly heavily focused on primary, you just never could really do it, or there wasn't any need to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and the few games that I've played recently, I've found that like I'm usually up on primary most games.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, you're right about the secondaries because you pull like a 3-point secondary, and you actually have to ask yourself, is this just going to be a 5 points if I save this for a CP to go through a wall? And it's just such a risk reward. All right, what do they have going against them? What are their downsides, mate?
Meta is still hostile. People are still taking for high toughness multi-wood. So like everyone should have something in their army which should be able to deal with knights. They are still very vulnerable to fast melee armies or fast rush armies. Sisters with their fast shooting, with the Bringers of Flame, are also very bad. They just can't get rushed. And as I said before, they are a bit vulnerable for when you get the cards in the wrong order, so to say. You do need a little bit of good RNG.
Fair. I do like what you said. The meta is still hostile. I actually, funnily, think the meta got weaker but more hostile to Chaos Knights.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, so the pivots from, of course, the pivots in Sisters of Battle, Sorotis, going to even heavier into the mechanized options with the Exorcists, in addition to the Casticators, in addition to the Immolators, means that people are more behooved to take, anti-mech. And then, tank commanders, Lehman Russes of whatever stripe, and Rogal Dawns being so prevalent as well. It just means people just really want to take that stuff, but have kind of less of them in their armies. So there's more of those armies out there, but those armies have a few less of those pieces. So it all comes out in the wash, I guess.
Yeah, and terrain is still a very big factor. Like some people would say that you would want more of an open board so you could move around easily or you could shoot things easily. But I prefer the densest boards possible because you don't want to get ganged up on by your opponent shooting. You can play into Imperial Guard if the board is dense enough, but if it's just a little bit too open, you just can't do anything.
So what you mean is and correct, this is just me talking about my personal experience. The worst thing that can ever happen is that in your opponent's turn, you lose 2 knights to shooting and 2 knights to melee in the same turn. Those are the games you don't generally come back from, or more. It could be 3 and 3, it could be 3 and 2. But because you're saying the heavy boards are better because you don't take the risk of losing 2 knights to in a firing lane in addition to possibly melee.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And also, a lot of this comes with experience. Like if your opponent is a very experienced into Chaos Knights, then it's always harder. I mean, that's the way it's going to be with every army. But you one of the strengths you should have as a Chaos Knight player is knowing what your dogs can reliably kill and what will reliably kill your dogs. So if an opponent commits with something that should kill a dog, but you know that if you pop the 6+ Feel No Pain, or if there's a
Yep.
Nurgling nearby, or if you heroically intervene with the Nurglings, something like that, and that there's a chance that they'll live, and that if they will then live, that could be that's just game changing.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Even a one wound knight is like highly problematic to be left alive. In saying that, have you found much of a struggle in the fact, because you main Chaos Knights, you've been playing a lot, and I'm assuming you play a lot of the same people either at local tournaments or garage games. Do you find people just getting better and better against your army because your army has been exactly the same for almost a year, or actually over a year?
No, not really. For some reason.
Good answer.
But I don't really understand why. Because as you said, the army, my army is pretty much literally the same. Like the event I'm going to next week, the title is More of the Same. it's literally the same list I've been running for months. I know it has one unit of Nurglings more, but I feel like if you are a main Chaos Knight player, you play them religiously and well. That's a big change from your average Chaos Knight player. It's a bit like Orcs. If you play into an Orcs player, you are likely to win because they are screaming "wah" and they're having the best time of their life, and that's amazing. They're not really busy dealing with strategy. So if you're playing into a good Orcs player, then all of a sudden everything is different. And it's a bit the same with Chaos Knights, because loads of players just rush you. They just run forward with their Chaos Knights and expect them to roll over the enemy. But if you stand back, if you do the mission, if you place your stuff well, so you always get cover and you never get caught out in the open, and you can do the heroic intervention, you use the demon support well. That's something not a lot of players see often. I feel.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of people look at Chaos Knights across the board and expect them to pretty much just act like a Space Wolf army almost, where they just kind of just go at you. But the beauty of Chaos Knights is that they're a control army. They're a tempo, much more of a tempo-based army. Talking about more of the downsides, when you talk about fast melee armies, do you just mean Blood Angels, or because you just said you have a good game into Orcs? Orcs is a fast melee army, so where's the delineation between the two?
Oh, I didn't say I had a good game into Orcs. I said I have a good game into bad Orc players.
I have a great game, mate. I have a great game into bad players. That's
same. Although Orcs are better than Blood Angels or World Eaters, usually because of their low leadership, you can do more of your tricks. And they die more easily. So, like your masses of indirect always does a lot of damage. And Orcs also aren't in the best spot at the moment, I would say. But like sometimes if you go for a second against a World Eaters player and you don't have enough Nurglings, or you just slightly mispositions your Nurglings and they get the right blood points stuff, there's just nothing you can do. You just get run over turn one. And Blood Angels is bad as well, but it's gotten slightly better because of the nerf to jump back Death Company dudes. They're still good, but just the fact that not everyone has an Infernal Pistol and or a Power Fist makes it better.
I actually agree. Things like Sangard are a bit more awkward. Like they're a carnivore into a 4+ info on Sangard can be problematic. I mean, they were at the same. They were taking the same. They were still taking a 4+ versus a carnivore with armor contempt anyway. But the -1 hit, -1 wound is horrible.
Yeah, no, that's the worst. But stuff like Dark Angels, which everybody feared, that was great. It was great for Chaos Knights.
Yeah, tell us why.
Because the -1 damage doesn't really do, like from the Deathwing Knights, the -1 damage doesn't really do a lot.
Yeah.
Because of our damage output is very high, and all the profiles just stack really well. It's just like I see Deathwing Knights as 5 tiny tanks, and all my stuff is good into killing tiny tanks.
Yep. I genuinely agree with that as well. And also, even stuff like the Gatlings on the Brigands are the right breakpoint at the strength 6 with possible AP2. That if they don't AOC, they're still on the same save, so there's not really any wasted motion there, which is quite nice. Not having a better the tank shot getting nerfed is a bit sucks, but it is what it is. Yeah. Did you find that a significant change?
I do. Yeah, I mean, I think I spent pretty much a third of my CP on tech shocks every game.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a big change. It does mean that you're more likely to do it with Brigands now, and that does feel kind of good because you're not min-maxing it just to use it on carnivores anymore. And a Brigand charging scouts and then tank shocking 2 of them to death and then tying up the rest does feel good.
I do like it for the Brigand to just like flip an objective. Like if they've got 5 OC2 models on it, you're pretty good odds to go in there and kill 1, possibly 2, and then it's your objective. Or worst case it's tied 8-8. Let's talk about best current builds in your estimation. So if you're going to a singles event right now, it sounds like you are. What is your list for next weekend?
My list for next weekend is more of the same. It's a Stalker, no announcements on it because of the points. I run mine with a Melt-A-Gun and a Fist just because of the meta. I do kind of rate the chain gun on a Stalker because of the +1 to wound, but shooting a Melta with +1 to wound always feels better than shooting a chain cannon with 1. But you gotta have him. He's the worst knight. You always throw him out to die usually. Then I take 5 Brigands and 6 Carnivores and 2 times 3 Nurglings and 10 Plague Bears. And I've really grown to love the Plague Bears.
All right, explain. Tell the people why.
Well, they're sticky, and they're a huge unit, and they're toughness 5, and they're 2 wounds apiece. So they don't die very easily. They sticky your home field objective or midfield if you need them to. And the unit is huge, which means you can block off your entire DZ with them. And means I don't have to use any knights to stand back. Which for me is very big mentally. I don't want to worry about my DZ.
Backfield. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I do love just getting something in the army that has a footprint because it's. I mean, with 3-inch deep strikes, there's just kind of nothing you can do. You're at their mercy. But putting in the Plague Bearers really just cinches up that backfield. I like that a lot. And you still think Nurglings are worth it in multiples?
Yeah, for sure. So the OC0 and the change to actions is a massive difference, like in the not the last balance patch, but one before, which means that doing actions is a lot harder now. We talked about it a bit previously, but Nurglings are the single thing that could let you win against World Eaters or Blood Angels, I would say.
Yeah, they give you the game, especially in some of the new deployments with the. No, it's not linchpin. Tipping points, where they can just get you. They can just get you, mate. It's rough. You can't they get to play with more deployment, and you have to play with less deployment because you just can't risk it. All right. So you still think that's 12 knights and then Toons and Nurglings, 10 Plague Bearers. So definitely still taking the allies. We do need to consider teams quite strongly when it comes to Chaos Knights because I believe they are completely different beasts almost. But tell me about how you feel Chaos Knights rack up in teams.
Unless you have a dedicated Chaos Knight player, I probably wouldn't take them in teams. Sadly. I think some people could run them, but generally you would be better off just for the team playing pretty much anything else. But I went to a team event last month, and we didn't really plan it, but we ended up playing. Almost everyone was very vehicle heavy, and then you do have a good composition where they slot in well. But in teams, the 13 dog or even 14 dog list is probably at least as good or better, just because you can give the demons to something else. Although I would say that demons do generally give you like 1 or 2 differential points a game more. So it is something to still consider giving to the CK. But it depends on their role. Like if you want them to get the high scores, then you should give them that. But if they're there to be a stat check army mainly, then the 13th or 14th dog is probably better.
Yep. And so that's literally just 1 Stalker as a character, 6 and 6 Carnivores and Brigands. Yep. Mm-hmm. If you do get the... Actually, are you finding getting the 14th in?
I haven't run it myself, but I've seen people high on it. But I just really don't like the idea of running 6 Stalkers because of Assassinate.
Yeah. Because then Assassinate Bring It Down becomes a actual choice.
Yeah, exactly. But if you compare it well in teams, it could work. I would think.
Do many people take fixed versus you?
No, nobody ever takes fixed.
I have had everyone who's ever taken fixed versus me on Chaos Knights has absolutely regretted it. So that's my hot tip. No, don't take the bait.
I've had one person do it. There was the previous balance patch, and he actually won the game. It was a pretty cool final at an RTT, but nobody else has ever done it. And like, if you remember from last time we spoke, Adam, I was very high on fixed. I was playing fixed all the time, every time. And now I have never, ever done it since the previous
I told you off. I told you off to take you fixed. Well, my perspective was the CP was too important, but it wasn't the wrong option. I just found my army got to play more consistently when I just took tactical every time. Mm-hmm. But I still took fixed a couple. But I found just keeping my knights working at like 100% at all times gave me more consistent results, because I found I was getting big wins, big losses with fixed. Mm-hmm. But anyway, next question. Fringe build. Actually, how good do you think? So you're saying Chaos Knights are a B tier army in singles. Do you think they're any better in teams, or are they still a B tier, or even worse?
I would say probably B tier is very large. There's a lot of A or B tier armies. So no, I don't think they're better for teams. As I said before, it just depends on your composition. Like if you do a number of high toughness armies, sure, slot them in. They will do great.
Yeah.
And if you have a good player who is confident on them, like there's loads of armies now that if you have a good player who knows exactly what he or she is doing, then do it. It doesn't really matter what you take. But I wouldn't take them, like I wouldn't start my team journey with, okay, who here can play Chaos Knights? No. Like, if you have the player, take them. Otherwise, no.
Fair. All right, Fringe builds. Anything in your app right now, in your army designer of choice that you're like, one day, this will be it one day? Do you have that list?
I have one list which is called the biggest of hogs, and that is a tyrant. I just love the idea of a tyrant. Sadly, not the flamer dude, but the plasma dude.
Yeah.
With the AOC, of course, and a couple brigands and a couple, as many carnivores as you can take, and then still some nurglings and a sloppity ball piper. I genuinely think this could work. But the tyrant is just 50 points too expensive. Like, if I could reserve him, I would take him.
Exactly. I was about to say exactly the same thing. We don't have Mythic Hero or whatever, the uppy downy once per game that Imperial Knights have, which has been the only way that I've ever seen the Castellan taken in the edition. That's only that ability that makes it viable. But any other Fringe builds that you can think of that could become good? You know, let's say Sisters and Guard get nerfed. We already know Guard's getting nerfed by the WCW FAQ, saying that, you know, you can't deep strike Aquilons. So you can't rapid ingress Aquilons 3 inches. You can only deep strike them 3 inches in your own turn. So that's a nice change. But funnily enough, it wasn't that big a hit. That wasn't that big a deal for Chaos Knights. It just meant you had to have the CP for walking through walls and units. But
Exactly,
they were making you spend the CP. Like you're like, well, I'm gonna spend a CP to make you spend a CP, and possibly not where you wanted to spend that CP. So that was an issue.
Yeah.
Do you see there is any alternative build that could, be on the fringe should some nerfs come through for some predators?
Knights will always be on the cusp of being viable, like big knights on the cusp of being viable. Like the points are almost there where you could take four, maybe five big knights. Five could work. And there's just going to be some armies you cannot deal with 5 toughness 12. Dudes, that's just going to be the way. So I have seen Mad Lads taking 5 dudes to events, and I mean not doing amazing, but doing better than I would say.
I'm almost ashamed of your Dickie V. You haven't mentioned the chattest army in all of 40k, the chattest possible army anyone could ever play. Do you know what it is?
3 rampagers and 6 carnivores?
You're fucking right, it is. I did swear on the main show. Bleep it, Seamus. Bleep it. It's the best. I want to do it so much. It's freaking awful, and I still want to play it. Because I can't think of anything that could ever be more fun than triple rampager, 4 carnivores, yeeteth at them, and it's just
Honestly, it sounds amazing, but I'm just too much of a tryhard for this art. It's just I cannot see the fun in this for more than, okay, let's play against my buddy. I don't want to waste my time bringing this to an event. Sorry.
Why? What do you mean? You don't want to commit to like 8-9 games with? You will be so well rested, mate, because you'll be done in 2 turns every game.
Funnily enough, I don't think that's going to be the case. You're going to have to play at least 3 turns because you're going to want to push 2 carnivores and 1 big dude out every turn. And you can't push them all out.
By the time you've done that twice, it's either worked or it hasn't.
Okay, good point.
The third one ain't gonna make a diff. The third wave, and your backfield is absolutely gone. Like your backfield is just it's not even there anymore.
No, that's very true.
And on that whimsical note, we're going to finish off this part 1. We're going to go over and record part 2. We're going to do some wish listing. We're going to talk about what we would love to see in a Renegade Knight Codex, Chaos Knights Codex. Also, any changes we think that should be made to the game that make Chaos Knights a bit better. Also talk about a couple of matchups, and hopefully you will join us there. Definitely hit the song at the end here, Seamus, because it's the end of this episode. But Dickie V, is there anything you would like to plug or tell the people about before we check out?
Well, for any Dutch listeners out there, I'm from the Netherlands, and if you haven't heard by now, there's a Dutch league. It's called the DTC. Pretty much all events held in the Netherlands get ranked on the DTC. So the organizer, Dean, he really puts his heart and soul into it, but he has a Patreon because it does cost him money to do this. And if you like the DTC, just consider subscribing to that.
Nice. I've got so many memes of what the DTC could stand for in my head.
I know them all.
I was about to say, I know many a Dutch lad, and I bet they've not been holding back. Also, fantastic country. I freaking loved my time in Amsterdam. So yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Dick Vanderhaast. Good luck with your weekend's event coming up.
Thank you.
And thanks for your expertise and your time.
Yeah. See you soon, Adam.
See you soon. We're about to record again. What a weird thing to say. Dickie V.